His local bounty completely imploded, by the way.
Basically. Okay, so we'll start off with two quotes. The first is from the philosopher Hegel. You may have heard of him.
Hegel.
He produced some. This quote is been used for what's called the Hegelian method of argumentation, which is truth is found neither in the thesis nor in the antithesis, but in an emergent synthesis which reconciles the two. Come on down.
You're in the right place, Yochanan. Come on in.
Right.
Welcome, welcome. Shalom Aleichem.
My friend Moshe.
Hi.
Great to meet you.
Yochanan, nice to meet you.
This is Stephen.
Okay, so Hegel had this this quote about truth is found neither in the thesis nor in the antithesis, but in an emergent synthesis which reconciles the two. Hegel was probably preceded by several hundred years. The Balei Kabbalah talk about this idea of chesed, and then the opposing force of gvura or din, and then the reconciliation between the two, which is termed rachamim or tiferet. It's the same.
You want water?
No, thank you. Same basic idea. So we'll try to present our own version of the thesis, the antithesis, and then the synthesis. Maybe not in that exact order, but since we're talking about Tu B'Av, we'll pull out a second quote, which I will not do the voice for. Maybe Charles will. But the quote is, "Marriage is what brings us together today."
Marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today.
Very good. And that is from the Princess Bride. Okay, so we're here on Tu B'Av to talk about marriage, but first we have to introduce some of our heroes from Tanakh. So we're going to start with Yehoshua. Everybody knows Yehoshua. He's the eventual replacement of Moshe, brings the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael. They conquer the land of Canaan. In fact, the entire book of Yehoshua is essentially the process of Yehoshua becoming his own version of Moshe, to the extent that his last soliloquy is the same as Moshe's. It's telling the Jewish people what they've done wrong and making sure that they don't go astray, because otherwise things are all going to fall apart. We'll read a couple psukim actually. He says in Parak Chaf Gimel, "V'chazaktem me'od lishmor v'lasos es kol hakasuv b'sefer Torah Moshe levilti sur mimenu yaminu small." So be very. They translate resolute. Be very strong. Guard and do everything that it says in the Sefer Torah of Moshe. Don't stray from it. Yaminu small. And then he actually starts bringing in this language of love and marriage, and he tries to have the Jewish people recall that their relationship with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a marriage type relationship, and that they should not then stray and be like the wife who leaves her husband to go chase after foreign gods or foreign nations. Levilti bo bagayim ha'ela hanisharim ha'ela itchem. Don't mingle, they translate bo bagayim, but it really means to have relations with the Goyim. Hanisharim ha'el itchem, that are still remaining, because Yoshua wasn't successful in fully driving out all the Goyim in the land of Canaan. Ub'shem Elohehem lo tazkiru, don't mention the name of their foreign gods. V'lo tishbu'u v'lo ta'abdum, and don't swear in the name of a foreign god, and don't worship them. V'lo tishtachavu lahem, and don't bow down to them. Ki im ba'Hashem Elokechem, only Hashem your God tidbakun, should you be mitdabek, right? We saw when we were going through Bereshis that this is how that the woman is supposed to be mitdabek to her husband. So Kim b'Hashem Elokechem tidbakun ka'asher asisem ad hayom hazeh, that you should remain connected to Hashem ad hayom hazeh, to this very day. V'yarish Hashem mipnechem goyim gedolim v'atzumim v'atem lo amad ish b'fnechem ad hayom hazeh, and Hashem, because you've clung to Him, you've been faithful in your relationship, so Hashem has basically wiped out everybody from before you until this very day. Ish echad mikem yirdof alef, so one Jewish soldier has chased away 1,000 of his enemies. Because Hashem is really the one that's fighting for you. And then he continues with the same loving and marriage metaphor. Guard your souls very much. Le'avas Hashem Elokeichem, to love Hashem your God. Ki im shov tashuvu udavaktem beyeser hagoyim, because if you return and you start clinging again to these other nations, ha'ela nisharim ha'ela itchem, that are still remaining, v'his chatan tem bahem, and you are mitchatein, right? You marry into them,
Yeah.
right? Uvasem bahem, and you go join along with them, vehem bachem, and then they join along with you, meaning that you are free to have relations with these non-Jewish nations that you're in their midst, and you're now clinging to their gods. So Yodea Teda ki lo yosif Hashem Elokeichem lahorish es hagayim ha'ela. Know that Hashem is not going to allow it. He's not going to allow you to drive out these other nations. Mibnechem v'hayu lachem lepachul u'mokesh u'lesotet b'tzidchem. They're going to cause all kinds of scourge and snares. They're going to be a pain in your side, litznonim beinechem, and they're going to be like thorns in your eyes, until you are forced out of this good land, hazos asher natan lachem Hashem Elokeichem, that Hashem your God has given you. Okay, so that is our first hero, Yoshua. The second hero is maybe a little less well known, and that is the Navi Hosea. So Hosea is the first of the Treyasar. You have copies of Treyasar over there. The so-called Nevi'im Achronim, which is really a misnomer because Hosea prophesies at the same time as Yeshayahu Hanavi. So sequentially, Hosea is around 700 before the Common Era. And actually the first pasuk in Hosea tells us that he prophesies during the time of four different kings Uzziah, Yotam, Achaz, and Chizkiyahu of Yehuda, and also Yeravam ben Yoash, not the Yeravam who set up the calves and the guards to stop people from being Ola Regel, but Yeravam, right, Yeravam II, son of Yoash of Israel. So that is Hosea's time period. He also prophesied. He was one of four Nevi'im that all prophesied at the same time. So there's Hosea, there's Amos, there's Micha, and Yeshaya. And interestingly, the pasuk refers to it as Tchilat Diber Hashem b'Hosea, that Hashem spoke to Hosea first, and Chazal learned from there that of those four prophets, Hosea was the greatest. He was actually the greatest prophet of his generation. The reason Hosea is so interesting is because the first three prakim of his book are
inscrutable.
Inscrutable is a good term. Are challenging because God tells Hosea to go marry a prostitute. And that is highly unusual to the extent that some Rishonim, like Radak and Rambam, don't believe it ever happened, right? They say Chas v'shalom, that a Navi should... God tells him very explicitly. He tells him who the person is. Gomer bat Diblayim is a known prostitute. I want you to go marry her, father kids with her, and have a whole relationship with her, because that relationship reflects the relationship that the Jewish people have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They are straying. They're not treating the marriage appropriately. So I want you, Hosea, to live that experience. But in spite of what some of the Rishonim will tell you, the Gemara is very explicit that this happened. This literally happened, and Hosea had to deal with Gomer not being faithful to him, even though he had a whole family and a relationship with her. That's the first part of the book of Hosea. The second part of the book is essentially him giving rebuke to the Jewish people about what's going to happen if they stray and continue in this way of not treating their relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a monogamous marriage. And I will give you a couple psukim from chapter 9, some very interesting poetry that Hosea gives us. He says, Al tismach Yisrael el gil ka'amim, rejoice not, O Israel, as the other people exult. Ki zanisa mi'al Elohecha, ahavta esnan al kol garnos dagan. For you have strayed away from your God, you have loved a harlot's fee by every threshing floor of new grain. Just as a side point, maybe we will get to it if we ever get back to Rus, but apparently this is a common practice that the prostitutes would go visit people on the granary floor, and that's why they're referring to the harlot's fee on the threshing floor of new grain. Goren v'Yakov lo yiram v'tiroshi chashba. The threshing floor of wine and winepress you shall not join them, and the new wine shall betray her. Lo yashuvu be'eretz Hashem, you won't remain in the land of Hashem. V'shav Ephraim Mitzrayim, and Ephraim will turn to Mitzrayim. Ba'ashur tamei yochelu, and Ashur And Ephraim will, and they will eat unclean food from Ashur, from Assyria. That is Yeshayahu. I'm sorry, not Yeshayahu. That is Hosea. Thank you. Now, why are we contrasting Hosea and Yehoshua? So there's a lot that the two have in common.
Their name.
Okay, we're gonna get to the name in a minute. Let's start at the easier ones. There are, according to Chazal, there are only 48 prophets whose Nevi'us was written down Ladoros. Hosea and Yoshua are two of those 48, but they are also
Related.
one second, not that I know of. I think they're from different Shvatim. The Not every prophet that we know of do we get the name of the prophet and the name of the father of the prophet. So we have Yoshua bin Nun and Hosea ben Be'eri. So the Gemara tells us that any prophet where you have the name of the prophet and the name of his father tells you that that is a prophet, the son of a prophet, right? So that is also something that they share in common. The third thing that we have is that they were both the greatest of their generation. Hosea, we mentioned, Chazal say that he was Tchilat Diber Hashem Be'Hosea, that he was the greatest of his generation. Yoshua obviously is the greatest of his generation.
Both married. Well,
then okay, so then we're going to get to the next one, which is that they both married prostitutes.
Right.
Very unusual thing. So Rachav,
a former prostitute.
Rachav was a zona, right? The Psukim tell us very explicitly in Sefer Yoshua that Yoshua laid siege to. So Yoshua sent spies to Yericho, and they stayed by this woman of ill repute. There are some people who want to read it as an innkeeper. I don't believe that's the simple reading of the Psukim. Rachav seems to be a zona, meaning a prostitute, and Chazal tell us that Yoshua married Rachav. So now you have two prophets, sons of prophets, who have married zonas, and as Charles mentioned before, they are the only two prophets who have the exact same name. So before he was Yoshua bin Nun, he was Hosea bin Nun, right? So there are only two prophets at all that we have record of who have the same name, who have married prostitutes, who on and on. The list is rather interesting. And the reason all of this is going to matter is because we're going to get to our third candidate over here, who's not really a hero, more of a villain. Just one thing to read to you the mimer from Chazal about knowing that a prophet whose father is mentioned, he's a Navi ben Navi. So the Medrash in Vayikra Rabbah says, Amar of Simon Be'eri lo nisnabe el shnei psukim. So Be'eri only prophesies two psukim, so you can't make a whole book out of two psukim. V'lo haya behem kedei sefer v'nitfilu b'Yeshaya. So the two psukim that Be'eri prophesies are actually loaded into the book of Yeshaya, and the Medrash quotes over there which of the psukim were. A number of Yochanan Kol Navi Shenispar Shemov and Nispar Shem Aviv. Any Navi where we get both the Navi's name and the name of his father, Navi ben Navi. V'chol Navi Shenispar Shemov v'lo Nispar Shem Aviv. Hu Navi v'Aviv Eno Navi. Okay. Now, well, I guess we can, as maybe a little bit of a tangent. Do you have any other leader of the Jewish people from Tanakh who had a relationship with a woman of ill repute? Shimshon. Charles, you're batting 1,000. Yeah. What's the difference between...
I know a lot about horse. That's just really what it is.
What's the difference between Shimshon and Yoshua?
Shimshon allowed the woman to negatively influence him, and that was his downfall, whereas...
And they didn't get married.
Right.
Right. Something else interesting about the names. So Yoshua marries Rachav, who's from Yericho. Right. And Chazal tell us that the Pnei Yoshua Pnei Levana, that the face of Moshe was like the face of the sun, and the face of Yoshua was like the face of the moon. He marries a woman from Yericho, which literally means moon town. Right? What does Shimshon's name mean?
Oh, Shimshon is like Shemesh.
Shemesh is the sun.
And Delilah is night.
Right. Okay. Well,
interesting.
We'll leave that as sort of a tangent. Maybe we'll come back to that. Okay, so I guess one last point with Hosea and Yoshua, they're both very preoccupied with the Jewish people's relationship to the land, to the point where the bracha in Birchas Hamazon about Birchas Haaretz was established by Yoshua. Besides being the person who divided up the land, And basically, from chapters 9 through 14 of Hosea are really about the Jewish people's relationship with the land and with HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
And they both bring down the marriage analogy.
Right. Okay. So our anti-Hosea, okay, I guess we'll do it as a pop quiz. For 500 Torah points, who is the only king of the Jewish people who has the same name as Hosea and or Yehoshua? That's it. We're really taxing the...
Yehoash?
No. His first name is Hosea. We have a king of Yisrael whose name was Hoshea ben Elah. He was a king who actually usurped the throne by killing
Previous king.
Pekach. Yeah.
Klingon promotion.
I guess we'll read his story very briefly. It comes from Malachim Bet, and it's only 6 psukim.
Yeah, he didn't live very
He
long.
He wasn't there for too long. Bishna 12 la'achaz melech Yehuda malach Hoshea ben Elah. Okay, B'Shomron, in Shomron al Yisrael Tesha Shanim, and he ruled for 9 years. That was in the 12th year of King Achaz. So the Meforshim all explained that the time doesn't work. If you look at the chronology, he couldn't have been ruling for only 9 years. It turns out that the 9 years the pasuk is talking about is the 9 years that he rebelled against against Ashur. Maybe we'll do one more just because I guess you guys like the whole Shimshon thing. There are 2 other people in Jewish history who married women of ill repute and claimed to be the leader of the Jewish people.
And claimed.
Yeah.
You're talking about Yashka?
So that's one. Mary Magdala.
Right. Shabtai Tzvi.
Shabtai Tzvi is number 2. Very good. Shabtai Tzvi married Sarah. What's that?
I'm not even married a woman of repute.
Yes, Shabtai Tzvi married Sarah. I don't know if she was officially a woman of ill repute, but she had a very poor reputation, which seems was very well deserved. Mm-hmm. Just, I guess, another interesting point. But okay, let's go back to Hoshea ben Elah. So he rebelled for 9 years, and that's the 9 years that we're talking about. Vayasara b'nei Hashem, he did what was evil in the eyes of Hashem, but Rak lo k'malachi Yisrael asher hayu lefanav wasn't as bad as all the other kings of the Jewish people, of Yisrael, I should say, before him. So just as a very brief recap.
Every king of Israel was listed as evil.
Right.
So for him to be like, but this one's not quite as evil, like that's a big compliment.
Right. So as a very brief recap, the monarchy splits in the time of Rechavam and Yeravam ben Nevat. Yeravam ben Nevat becomes the king of Yisrael. So he has a problem, which is he's not a king from Malchus Beis David. So if everyone goes to be Ola L'Regel, there's only one person that is allowed to sit in the Beis Hamikdash, and that is someone who comes from the lineage of David HaMelech. Everyone else has to stand. So Yeravam knows very quickly and intuitively, if I show up as like, oh, I'm also the king, well then how come you're not sitting? You must not be the real king, right? All the people are going to smell a rat, and they're going to decide that he's not legitimate, and they're all going to go back to Yehuda. So Yeravam knows he needs to fix the situation, and the way he fixes it is by essentially creating his own religion. He makes these golden calves, he sets up his own altar, he creates his own holiday, and then he sets up sentries, guardians, people to make sure that you cannot, even if you want to, be Ola L'Regel, right? Let's just keep all of that in mind as we talk about Hoshea ben Elah. Alav Allah Shalmaneser. Against Hoshea, Shalmaneser is one of the kings of Ashur. Well, I guess we'll leave aside which king is which. The Vayihi lo Hoshea Eved Vayeshev lo Mincha. So Hoshea was essentially a vassal to him. I think we talked about this a while back. The concept of a vassal treaty. We have a lot of records of the Hittite people who created this template of what a vassal is. So a vassal is, you have a tiny kingdom and you have a really super strong kingdom. So the tiny kingdom gets to pretend that it's independent. It pays some sort of tribute or homage, right, to its lord, and that larger kingdom will offer protection if anyone comes and attacks Yisrael. So they've got Ashur in their back pocket who will come to their aid should anything befall them. But
That way they don't have to worry about the maintenance cost of running the second kingdom.
right. You and rebelling and all the annoying stuff that comes along with that. The problem was Vayimsa Melech Ashur beHoshea Kesher Asher Shalach Malachim El So Melech Mitzrayim. So the king of Ashur caught Hoshea in an act of treachery. Hoshea had sent envoys to this the king of Mitzrayim, whose name was So. V'lo ha'ala mincha, and Hoshea stopped sending his mincha offering lamelech Ashur, kashana b'shana, like he did every year. V'yatzru melech Ashur, v'yasruhu beis kela. And so Ashur shows up and says, well, I guess, we don't have a deal anymore, and therefore you're under arrest, and he hauls him off to prison, and that is essentially the end of the rule of Hoshea ben Elah. He goes into Galus, and he's the first of the kings of Yisrael to no longer be king and be in exile. Vayal melech Ashur b'chol haaretz vayal Shomron v'yatzar aleha shalosh shanim. So another king of Ashur, lays siege to Shomron for 3 years and essentially just wipes everything out. B'shnat Tishi'it laHoshea lakad melech Ashur es Shomron. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Ashur now captures Shomron, which was the capital of the north. Vayagel es Yisrael Ashuran. He exiles all of Yisrael to Ashur, and there's all kinds of land swaps with the people from other people that Ashur has conquered are now going to be moving into Shomron. Those are the Samaritans. Vayeshev otam bechalach ubechavor Nahar Gozan and Are Madai, and he settles them into Chabor, Chala, and at the river Gozan, the towns of Madai. Okay, that is the brief and sad story of Hoshea ben Elah. Now it happens to be that Hoshea ben Be'eri, our hero, the Navi, he actually overlaps chronologically with Hoshea ben Elah. They lived at the same time, and Hoshea ben Elah actually fulfills the prophecy of Hoshea ben Be'eri. If you remember the last pasuk we had from Hoshea ben Be'eri, let me just pull it up real fast. V'lo yashvu ba'aretz Hashem v'shav Ephraim Mitzrayim. Ephraim is going to go after Mitzrayim. Uba Ashur tamei yochelu. And then in Ashur they are going to eat unclean food. That's exactly what happened. There's actually more psukim. If you want to open up, we can see a few of them inside. If you want to open up to Hosea 10:5. Let's get someone to read.
Yeah,
No, 10. Starts with Leglos.
yeah.
Go for it. Just 10:5 and 6.
Leglos. Face Aven, Yoduru, Shechan Shomron, Ki Achal Alav Amo, V'Chomar Alav Yigilu Al Kvodo, Yigalu Mimenu. Behold, of the calves of Betavim, the inhabitants of Samaria will be frightened, because people will mourn over it, as well as its priests, who used to rejoice over its glory, which has been exiled from it.
Right, so that's Hosea prophesizing that the people are going to go in exile, and the people, specifically the people of Beit Aven, where they have this calf from Yeravam, those are the ones who are going to go into exile. Let's keep going.
Kamosu la'ashur yuval mincha l'melech yarev b'shana bashna Ephraim yikach v'yevosh yisol me'atzoso. 6. The 2 will be brought to Syria. The gift to the king of Yareh. Ephraim will take shame, and Israel will be shamed for its counsel.
So again, that same idea. And I'll just read to you one more pasuk that is in Perek Yebet. Ephraim roe ruach v'rodef kadim kol hayom kazav v'shod yerbeh ubrit im Ashur yichrosu v'shem el Mitzrayim yuval. Ephraim tends the wind and pursues the gale. He is forever adding illusion to calamity. Now they make a covenant with Assyria. Now oil is carried to Egypt. So all the things that Hosea ben Elah is involved in, Hoshea ben Be'eri had prophesized. Okay, so we said Hoshea ben Elah was not as bad as all the other kings. So what did he do that made him not quite as bad as everybody else?
He remove the sentries, right?
He removed the sentries. So Yeravam ben Nevat set up these guards to stop everyone from being Ola L'Regel. Charles, you can just give the share at this point. And Hosheas ben Elah, he annulled the sentries. Now, okay, we'll read two Gemaras. So the first is the Gemara in Taanis that talks about there are 5 tragedies on Tisha B'Av, and there are 6 reasons for rejoicing on Tu B'Av. And there's a very clear connection between Tisha B'Av and Tu B'Av that's documented in the Gemara in Taanis in Yerushalmi that starts with the Jews in the Midbar. Is everyone familiar with this? Should I skip it, or we can?
No,
This is good.
Let's do
Okay, so the Meraglim come back. They give a bad report. They Hevias Dibam Ra, which is actually connected to Gomer. The Gemara darshans the name Gomer Bat Divlayim as Diba Ra. That she was also she spoke lashon hara. But okay, the Meraglim come back. They give a bad report. The Jews cry. V'yivchu am b'layla hahu. Right, and Hashem says Atem b'chitim b'chiyah shalchina maniak b'alachem b'chiyah doros. So that's Tisha B'Av, right? So every year, says the Gemara, that the Jews were in the Midbar. On Tisha B'Av, they would dig their own grave and lie down in the grave. And the next day, they would get up and see who got up and who didn't get up, right? That happened for 39 years in the Midbar. And then on the 39th year, they all dug their grave, they lay down in their grave, and they all got up. And they're like, what's going on? It's supposed to be Yom Lashana, that one year for every day that the Meraglim went, we're being punished for 40 years. It's the 39th year. So they figured we must have miscalculated on the day, right? It's not, last night was not actually Tisha B'Av, today's Tisha B'Av, so they again laid down in the graves, and again everybody got up, and this happened for every single night until the moon was full, which is Tu B'Av, the 15th of the month, and then they realized, okay, it's clearly not Tisha B'Av anymore, and so they began to rejoice because Hashem had cut the time short. We have this a number of times in Yiddishkeit where you have 40 minus 1. Give me some examples.
Lashes.
What's that?
Lashes.
Right? The Mishnah says, the Mishnah doesn't say you give 39 lashes, it says 40 minus 1.
Yeah.
What else is 40 minus 1? Malachot of Shabbos.
Yeah.
We'll leave aside the Mei Noach, but those are good examples to start. So they realized that it wasn't 40 years in the end, it was 39, and so they rejoiced on Tu B'Av. So that is the first time that you have this celebration on Tu B'Av, and the Gemara lists other things that we're celebrating on Tu B'Av, such as the Shvatim originally when you had the Benos Slavchad. So there was a concern that Shvatim, would lose their inheritance if it went after the women. So everyone made a shvuah that they're only going to marry from their own shevet. And then when they conquered the land, after Yoshua divided up the land, they found a heter for their neder, so that Shvatim were able to intermarry with each other. Another reason for the celebration. This relates back to the marriage theme, and I know you've all been waiting for me to tie any of this back into Tu B'Av. So one of the other reasons, says the Gemara, is because of Hosheas ben Elah removing the watchman. The Gemara says, Ula Amar, Yom Shabitel Hosheas ben Elah, Prusdoyos Shahoshiv Yeravam ben Nevat al Hadrachim. It's the time that Hosheas ben Elah removes the Prusdoyos, is a Greek word for century, that Yeravam ben Nevat had placed on the ways. Shelo Yalu Yisrael L'Regel, because he didn't want the Jewish people to be Ola L'Regel. The Amar and Hosheas ben Elah said, Le'ezes sheyirtzu yalu, whoever wants, you're allowed to go up. That is why Hosheas ben Elah is listed as the not quite so bad king of Yisrael. 2 points on this are very interesting. The first is he didn't really have a choice. It sounds like he did a very nice thing. The reason he did a very nice thing is because there were no more golden calves. There was no more religion. Previous to this, one of the kings of Ashur had already sacked most of the north and taken the golden calves with him. So no golden calves means no religion. No religion, then why are you not letting people be Ola L'Regel, right? The whole thing kind of fell apart.
Well, if his predecessors were still like, no, you still can't go. Like,
no, but this all happened in his time. The calves were gone in his time. I'll read you what Rashi says in one of the psukim we read earlier. Rak lo kamlachi Yisrael, that Hosheas ben Elah was not as bad as the other malachim of Yisrael. Shebitel prusdayos sheyashvu mimei Yeravam al hadrachim. Right, that's our Gemara. So Rashi continues lishmor. Shlo yalu Yisrael l'regel v'zeh bitlon, and the reason he annulled them is lefisha golu egle hazav kvar b'shtei golios b'golus rishona v'ikach es ion v'es dan. So Rashi mentions that there are multiple times where the Jews were exiled. First, there was like Gerish, Cherish, Mazger, the artisans, the affluent people, right? So when, as part of that exile, they took these calves along with them. Higle egel shebedan. That's when they grabbed and exiled the egel that was in Danu b'shnia shegolu Ruven v'Gad natel egel shebebeis el. And then when Ruven, Gad, and Chatzi Sheva Menashe were exiled, they took the calf that was in Beit El. So there was no reason for Hoshea ben Elah to continue the whole charade. Now, it's still a nice thing that he did. He didn't have to do this, right? So why is he listed as, well, he's bad. He's just not as bad. So the Gemara in Gittin explains this in a very interesting way. Amru le Rav Kahana Rav Asi l'Rav. Ksiv Bey says by Hoshea ben Elah, Vayas hara b'nei Hashem rak lo k'malachi Yisrael. He didn't do as bad as the other malachi Yisrael. Ksiv alav Allah Shalmaneser, and then it says that on him Shalmaneser came and exiled him, like we read. So why would this happen to this poor guy? He wasn't such a bad dude. Amar Lahu Osan Prusdoyos Shahoshiv Yeravam Al Hadrachim. Those watchmen that Yeravam had set up so the Jewish people shouldn't be Ola Regel, Ba Hoshea Ubitlan. Hoshea came and he removed them, like we said. V'at al pikein lo Ola Yisrael Regel. But even still, the Jews didn't show up. So now there's nobody guarding the way, and the Jews are still not Ola Regel. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu Osan Shanim Shelo Ola Yisrael Regel. The whole time that Yisrael was not coming up La Regel when there were, Gestapo on the way. So I understand. But now they're still not coming. Yelchu b'shevi. So then let the Jewish people go into captivity.
So he was the unwitting instigator of doom.
The unwitting, but maybe possibly a little bit witting, in that he doesn't say to them, he kind of missed an opportunity. The opportunity was,
says, okay, everybody, I'm making an announcement. If you want to go, you can go now.
Right. Instead of, hey guys, let's do it. Let's all go, right? Own the situation, even if you don't believe it. Just own the situation and say, we have a chance to be Ola Rega. Let's do it, right? Yeah. Instead of going with a gusto, it was like, look, if you want to go, I don't care. Right. Do what you want, right? Like backhanded klachar yad.
I see.
Okay. So the removal of those guards happens on Tu B'Av, and it's a reason for huge celebration on the one hand, but on the other hand, because they didn't go up, the Jews go into exile, which means they can't be Ola L'Regel even if they wanted to, right? Now.
Wow, that's tragic.
Right? Okay, we'll leave off some of that other stuff. What is the theme with all these three Hosheas that we've just dealt with? So I will submit to you that the theme here for us to understand is something practical to take away.
Estrangement?
I'm going to say faithfulness. And faithfulness as illustrated by showing up for God. I believe that Tu B'Av shows us the incredible importance of showing up. Now, this is not as easy as it sounds, right? Showing up in your relationship with your spouse, with your family, with whomever, doesn't always mean that you show up in your best self, right? It doesn't mean showing up with bells on and excited, but it means showing up and being present and not, grabbing your phone or grabbing some other excuse to be preoccupied and not show up. The lesson that we can take from Tu B'Av is that if you show up for God, God promises that He will show up for you. That's the promise and the ache that Hoshea ben Be'eri experiences in his relationship with his wife and mirrors the relationship that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has with the Jewish people. He wants them to show up. He wants to have a relationship with them. And when they don't show up for him, he can't show up for them. The opportunity and most of the simchas that the Gemara talks about with the girls in the vineyard and the people being able to marry into different shvatim is this. It's showing up. It's being there and saying, I want to have a relationship. Expressing that faithfulness, that desire to connect, that's what Tu B'Av allows us to tap into. I'd comment.